What is up, Psychonauts? So today I'm just going to talk about day tripping versus night tripping. So I started out, all of my first trips were night trips. That was kind of the classic way to do it, was that all night acid trip. So there are some really good things about night tripping. My favorite things about night tripping, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the stars, getting to look up at the stars, especially if you happen to be in a place away from light pollution, like I've been before on a camping trip. Looking up at the stars during the middle of a night trip is just one of the best things ever. I think there's also just something about it being nighttime where everyone's asleep. There's a calmness and a stillness to the outside world that you don't get during a day trip, and there's just something about it's being nighttime and you're supposed to be asleep right now and you'd usually be asleep, and I think that that kind of maybe makes for like a little bit more of a dreamy type trip. Another thing about night tripping that I think is really cool is just tripping into the early morning hours and watching a beautiful sunrise on your come down. So that's one of the perks of a night trip as well. Obviously, the biggest negative when it comes to night tripping is the sleep deprivation and sort of throwing off your sleep schedule. A all-night trip is harder to recover from most of the time because you've missed a night of sleep, and then, you know, the next day you're basically useless if you were tripping all night. I think another negative to night tripping is that you've already had your whole day, so you have all the information from the day to process still. And I often find during a night trip, my mind will go to like what happened that day, and it'd be like trying to process that information. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think a day trip, you can typically go into the trip with a clearer mind and you don't have all the day's information to process while you're having your trip. So day trips are honestly the best. They're really great. I think that, you know, I find I have more energy. I have a clearer mindset going into a day trip. There's a lot more things that you can do. Things like nature walks, while they're not necessarily something you can't do during a night trip, I think that they're more practical to do during a day trip. And nature is just beautiful in the sunlight. I mean, it's beautiful at night too, but there's something about that sunlight and being out in nature that is really attractive during a day trip. I just really like it being like the highlight of the day, like it's the day's activity. Like I said, I started night tripping, so I really there's something magical almost about night trips, and I don't know if that's just because I started out like that or just because it's nice to just have this experience while everybody else is asleep and the world isn't, you know, going on all around you. That is one of the negatives of a day trip, especially depending on your environment, but there might be more like outside distractions, outside noises, even potentially like interruptions, like somebody, I don't know, you never know what can happen during a trip, but there might be more potential interruptions during a day trip and things that come up, whereas a night trip, you would have just been sleeping anyway, so you're not really missing anything that you would have normally been doing. That's another thing with day tripping. While night tripping throws off your sleep, day tripping can like throw off like your eating schedule. I know I don't really like eating during trips, unless it's like maybe towards the end and then it's like something light. It will just change the way I'm gonna eat for the day. I don't think it's as significant as the sleep factor. That I think like messes me up. Definitely my last trip was a day trip, and I'd say my next trip is probably gonna be a day trip too. There is just something about a day trip, and I said the same thing about night tripping, but they really have their own flavors, and you know, it just is whatever is working for your life. If taking a night trip is what works for you, that's great. If taking a day trip is what works for you, that's great. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna say day tripping for the win, honestly, because I think it's just much more convenient to day trip, and I think that there's just more possibilities. I don't really like being sleep deprived. It didn't used to bother me maybe like 5 years ago when I started tripping, but it bothers me more now. So I'd rather take the day adventure trip. I think those are more what I'm looking for right now. Also, I think it's better for, you know, if you have intentions going into your trip, I think it's easier to just have your trip earlier in the day than like waiting all day if you have an intention for your trip. So that's really all I had to say. This was just gonna be a short video. I have a lot more ideas for videos, but I just wanted to do something kind of light, casual. Yeah, get kind of hyped up for whatever my next trip might be, which, like I said, it's probably going to be a day trip, so, you know, just reminiscing. There's just something about those all-night acid trips, though, that I don't think I'll ever get over. All my most significant trips happened, I think, during night trips, so I think I have like a bias for night trips. But then when I really think about it, I just want a day trip. I'm just kind of nostalgic about night trips. So let me know what you think. Do you like day tripping or do you like night tripping? What have you had the most experience with? Yeah, all that good stuff. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.